The Gemara discussing how Goyim back then were suspicious of murdering Yidden and how one needs to be careful. The Gemara gives an example. If the Goy asks you, where are you going? Then Yarchiv loyes haderech. You should broaden the way. What does this mean? So the Gemara explains, like Yaakov Avinu did for Esav HaRasha. The Pasuk says that Yaakov says to Esav, Ad asher avoy el Adoni se'ira, till I come to my master in Seir. But the Pasuk then says that where does Yaakov travel? To Sukkos. Rashi explains this to mean that if a Yid needs to be traveling, for example, the distance of 1 parsa, you should say to the Goy, I'm going 2 parsois. So that then the Goy might wait from trying to strike the Yid until the 2nd parsa, and already beforehand the Yid will separate, the Yid will go on his own way, and in that way he'll be protected. And this is similar to what Yaakov says to Esav. He says to Esav he's going to Seir, but he doesn't end up going to Seir, he only goes up until Sukkos. Because since there was a situation of sakonis nefashos, a situation of danger, Yaakov is telling Esav basically something that was not true. Now, in the Medrash discussing the same pasuk, the Medrash says, we searched all over Torah, we don't find that Yaakov Avinu goes to Esav in Har Seir. Is it possible, says the Medrash, that Yaakov, who is so truthful, is saying something that's not true to Esav? Rather, when is Yaakov going to go? La'asid lavi, when Mashiach comes. As the pasuk says, V'lo Mishim b'artziyah and lishpetas haresav. In other words, according to the Medrash, Yaakov said something that was true. Now it seems to me that the Gemara and the Medrash are arguing. The Gemara, according to the Gemara, Yaakov saw a situation of danger, and therefore he told Esav something that was untrue. According to the Medrash, Yaakov was not afraid of anything, and therefore the Medrash is searching to see where in fact did Yaakov go to Seir, and finally we say it's going to be when Mashiach comes. Now in Rashi and Chumash, he seems to be combining these two explanations. Rashi says as follows, Hirchiv lo yaderech, he broadened the road, because he was not planning to go, but only to Sukkos, that's where he was going. And he said to himself, Yaakov said to himself, if Esav is planning to do something bad to me, then he'll wait until I come to him in Seir, and he doesn't end up going. When is he going to go? In the time of Mashiach, as it says, V'olo Mishim b'artziyon lishpetas haresav. So the Rebbe says it's seemingly not understood. Rashi over here is explaining how Yaakov said the truth, because he's going to go when Mashiach comes. And in the Gemara, Rashi is telling us from Yaakov, we learn out that one is allowed to say an untruth in order to save himself. So the Rebbe is going to explain Hirchiv lo yaderech in Rashi and Chumash very different to what we thought it means, the way it was explained in the Gemara. Rashi says these words, Hirchiv lo yaderech. He doesn't say Herich lo yaderech, which would mean that he's giving a longer or a further place than he's really planning to go. Hirchiv lo yaderech actually means that Yaakov was telling Esav the truth, 100% the truth. Hirchiv lo yaderech, in the simple meaning of those words, would actually mean that he's going the same distance that he's telling Esav, but rather it's going to take a longer time. There's going to be pauses along the way. He's going to be delayed along the way. In other words, the word Hirchiv means that the actual road is the same long, but within one spot, he's going to stay there a longer time, so it's more expansive, more broad within that space itself. In fact, Yaakov says this clearly to Esav, I'm going to be going slowly. I have my sheep, I have my children, it's going to take a long time till I get to Seir. According to this, when Rashi then finishes off, so when is he going to go? So not only isn't it in contradiction to the beginning of the Rashi, which seemed to be saying he's not going to Seir, in fact it's just the opposite. It's the explanation of Hirchiv lo yaderech. Hirchiv lo means he's going to take a long time, and when is he finally going to get there? When Mashiach comes. Says the Rebbe, but if that's the way Rashi understands what Yaakov did, that he just told Esav, I'm going to be a long time till I get to Seir, then we need to understand on the other hand, why in the Gemara does Rashi say that if he needs to go 1 parsa, he should say he's going 2 parsois, and that's all based on the story of Yaakov. Another thing, says the Rebbe, we need to understand in the difference between the wording of Rashi in the Gemara and in Chumash. In the Gemara, Rashi says that he should say he's going 2 parsois. Ulai, perhaps the goy will wait from striking him until the 2nd parsa, which sounds like that the Yid is quite sure that the goy is going to strike him, but maybe he's going to delay. And again, since this is learned from Yaakov, it sounds like that's what Yaakov was thinking about Esav, that he's quite sure that Esav is going to strike him. But in Chumash, Rashi says that Yaakov said, Im daitoi, if he wants to do something bad to me, then he'll wait till I get to him in Seir. In other words, the whole thing is doubtful. So the Rebbe says the explanation is, Rashi always sticks to the simple pshat of what he's explaining. In Chumash, he's explaining the simple pshat of the Chumash. In Gemara, he explains the simple pshat of the Gemara, even if it's not going to fit with the simple pshat of the Chumash. Now, in the Gemara, this din is coming amongst other dinim where we speak about goyim being suspected for murder. And therefore, when the goy asks, where are you going? That's a sign. Why is he asking you where are you going? Because he wants to strike you. And this is emphasized in the Lashon of the Gemara where it says, as Yaakov did to Esav Yaakov Avinu did to Esav Harasha. In other words, so he's deviating from the truth because he's dealing with Esav who's a Rasha who's going to do something bad to him. That's in the Gemara. But when we learn Pshutei Shel Mikra, it's not necessarily so clear that Esav wants to harm Yaakov. On the contrary, Esav is hugging Yaakov and is kissing him, etc., etc. It seems like they're in brotherly love right now. And therefore, it's not so definite that he's going to strike him. It's only a bit of a concern. And therefore, Yaakov is taking this extra precaution, which is marchiv lo haderech, saying to Esav, look, it's going to take me a long time till I get to Seir. And Rashi says, only im daitoi lasis liro, so that if he has any plans against me, this will be taken care of. So the Rebbe says this is the difference between Rashi and Chumash and Rashi and the Gemara. In the Gemara, where we're speaking about a situation of a goy that's suspected actually of murder, it's a situation of danger. So then you're going to have to use a method that's even untrue, and you're going to say, instead of I'm going 1 parsa, you say I'm going 2 parsois. But in Pshutei Shel Mikra, where there's only a suspicion, only a bit of a concern, so for this it's enough just to marchiv lo haderech, which again, as the Rebbe is explaining it in simple words of Rashi and Chumash, would mean just to say that it's going to take you a long time till you get there, that you're going to be delayed in your path. The Rebbe now ties this into a Rambam, and the Rebbe says like this: based on the way we translated Rashi and Chumash of Hirchiv lo yisaderech, that you're not telling him a further place that you're going to go, rather you're just expanding the trip itself, taking a long time. Says the Rebbe, based on this we can explain the Rambam. The Rambam says, if the goy asks you where are you going, yarchiv lo yisaderech, you should broaden the road. Kederech she'erchiv Yaakov le'esav, like Yaakov did to Esav. As the pasuk says, ad asher avoy el adoini seir, until I come to my master in Seir. So the Rebbe says, first of all, the Rambam doesn't explain what does he mean with yarchiv lo haderech. He doesn't explain the system of telling him you're going a mile further. Also, the Rambam says, Yaakov says, until I'll come to Seir. But the Rambam does not bring the pasuk that practically Yaakov didn't go to Seir and he went to Sukkos. The Rebbe also asks, why is it in the Gemara there's an emphasis that it calls Esav Harasha, whereas in the Rambam, he just calls him Esav. But based on the way we explained Yarchiv lo haderech, the way Rashi learns in Chumash, which is again that he's not telling him a further place, he's just saying I'm going to take a long time till I get there. Says the Rebbe, we can explain that that's what the Rambam means as well. He tells the guy, he tells him his correct destination, but he also says, look, I'm going to be delayed. It's going to take me a long time till I get there. And hopefully with this will cause the guy to give up on his evil plots because he doesn't know, practically, he doesn't know when is the Yid finally going to get there. And that's why the Rambam says, like, Hirchiv Yaakov le'esav, and he only brings the pasuk, Ad asher avoy el adoini seira, because all he's saying is that I'm going to get eventually to Seir. Until I come there, meaning implying I'm going to eventually get to Seir, but I don't know how long it's going to take me. But it's totally not relevant to the fact that right now, in this next little bit, Yaakov traveled to Sukkot. That's not part of it at all. What matters is, in other words, we're not trying to emphasize that he told him something not true. What we're trying to say is, he said to Esav, I'll eventually get to Seir. That's why the Rambam also doesn't say Esav Harasha. Because, again, it's not that he's sure that Esav is this bad guy and I better be careful from him. Recently, he was showing brotherly love. And that's why it's just an extra precaution, and that's why he just calls him Esav. Says the Rebbe, we still need to understand. If we look into the Gemara, we'll see that right after this din in the Gemara brings 2 stories, which seemingly will prove clearly that Yarchiv Loi Haderech is, as Rashi explains in the Gemara, that it means you should tell him you're going further than you're really planning to, and not just to say that you're being delayed in the road. The Gemara brings a story with Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. They were going to a place called Ksiv. They met bandits. The bandits asked them, where are you going? They said, we're going to Aku. And then when they came to Ksiv, which is earlier on in the trip, suddenly they're parting ways already. And the robbers say to them, whose students are you? And they say, we're the students of Rabbi Akiva. And they say, wow, fortunate is Rabbi Akiva and his students that no bad person was ever able to harm them. The Gemara brings a similar story with Rav Menashe, who also encountered robbers. Now, seemingly, these stories are coming as to prove the halacha in the Gemara. And in these stories, definitely they're saying something untrue. They're saying something that they're going to a further place than they're really going. So how can we possibly then say that the Rambam, who's clearly paskening based on the Gemara, how can we then say that the Rambam is of the opinion that you just tell the guy you're going to take a long time, but not actually tell him an untruth that you're going to a further place? So the Rebbe says that we can explain this based on trying to understand the gedder of this din of what when a guy asks you where you're going. And the Rebbe says we can say that Rashi and the Rambam, Rashi and the Gemara that is, and the Rambam understand it in two different ways. One way of understanding it is, the Gemara mentions a number of things that a Yid needs to be careful with when he's a goy, not to be secluded with the goy. When you're going on the mountain, you should make sure you're on top and all of that. This is a general suspicion regarding goyim. And we might say that when the goy asks you where you're going, this is just part of that general idea. Another way of understanding it is that no, if he asks you where you're going, it's much more serious. There's much more, the danger is much clearer over here now. Because why is he asking you where you're going? Obviously, he wants to harm you. The Rebbe says this will also be a nafkamina, a difference bizman hazeh these days. Many of the poskim say that goyim these days are not suspected of murder. There's courts of law and punishments and consequences, etc. So the question is, in our case, if the goy asks you where you're going, if it's the same idea like all these other dinim concerning goyim, so we would say that these days there's no concern about goyim for other things, there's no concern if he asks you where you're going. But if we say that when he asks you where you're going, now the danger is a much more certain one, then even these days you would have to sort of give him some other places where you're going, not be clear where you're going, to avoid this danger. Says the Rebbe, so this now could be the difference between Rashi in the Gemara and the Rambam. Rashi is learning the Gemara again. We say Rashi learns the Gemara simply. And the Gemara brings these stories of the person encountering robbers and bandits, etc. And so it seems like, according to the Gemara, this idea when a guy is asking you where to go, it's a much more dangerous situation, similar to these stories. And this is why Rashi says that when a guy asks you, you need to do everything to deceive the guy. And in the stories, we actually see that it worked. That these people were saved because they told the bandits, the robbers, a different place. But the Rambam learns that this din, when a guy asks you where you're going, is just similar to all the other dinim regarding goyim. That is just a concern, but it's not a real danger. And therefore, the Rambam learns that Yarchiv Lo Yaderech just means, not that you're telling him something that's untrue, you're telling him, look, it's going to take me a long time till I get to my destination, and hopefully that will avoid the guy causing trouble. You're going to then say, so why is the Gemara bringing the stories? The stories clearly are situations where they told these robbers untruths, because these stories are not an example for the regular halacha of a guy asking you. This is a different situation. Here it was clearly bandits and robbers, and therefore this is, in truth, these stories are a new halacha that if in fact the danger would be much more obvious, then you would have to take on that sort of idea of saying things that are untrue, etc. But in a regular case, you could just delay saying you're going to be longer in your way, etc. In that way, discouraging the robber. Discouraging the goy who we have no proof that he's a robber. The Rebbe now looks b'pnimiyus inyanim, and the Rebbe says a fascinating thing. The fact that there could ever be a possibility that a goy should have any control over a yid is when a yid thinks that his place is golus and that the goy could have power over him. But when the yid has this attitude of marchiv loy haderech, which is like Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu says, I'm going to Seir. When is he really going to go? When Mashiach comes. When the yid has that attitude, that he tells the goy that all my being in Galus is just a delay along the way. I'm heading to the Geula. It's just right now, there's a preparation to the Geula. Right now we need to be refining and bringing light into the Golus, etc. But we're all on the way to the Geula. Then, even in the preparation, even on the road, the power of the Goyishkeit, the power of the Goy completely gets canceled out. He doesn't have any control over the Yid. The Yid has peace, both physically and spiritually, even before the Geula, in their bodies, physically, with their money, monetary, and Bana Chayim, Zoyne Devichit, children, health, Parnasa, all in an abundant way. And we can learn Torah, Nigla, and Chassidus in a peaceful way. And by doing that, all of that hastens the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu when va'alu Mashiach ba'atzin lishbetis hareisav b'meheira v'yameinu mamash.